mystery of life, and they never. Oh, everybody knows that life is not a mystery, right? I mean, if you keep up your subscription to TV Guide and you know, your American Express card is current, what the hell? Life ain't no mystery after all that. You got it right where you want it, right? Right in the corner there. Ah, sweet mystery of life. And ending ever. La da 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 da. La da da dee dee. La da 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 dee dee. And you thought Dustin Hoffman was funny. Poor little schlep. Bring it up there. And now, ladies and gentlemen, fellow victims of our time, I'm going to take this moment off, just this moment, to light a cheap 5-cent cigar. You know, I'll tell you, it's confession time. Let's face it. Once in a while you have to confess something. I go to this friend's luncheon the other day, which he had over at the Yale Club. Now, that's very official, you know. And I'm sitting there at the Yale Club, and all those ex-Yaleys are all sitting around. You know, they still wear gray flannel suits over there. It's fascinating. You go into the Yale Club and you discover that 1937 is alive and well. And I'm sitting there in the Yale Club seeing this friend of mine who's one of the members over there. He says, that was very nice, smoked salmon. Would you care for an after-dinner cigar? And he passes over to me a typical Yale-type after-dinner cigar. And it takes 8, 9, 10 minutes to light one of these babies. You know, this is the kind that comes in a shoulder holster. You know, it's tremendous. It's such an enormous cigar. It's got twigs growing out of it. You know, it's fantastic. So I start to light this cigar up, you know, and I suddenly realize it's just a terrible thing to have to realize. I have bad taste. This is confession time. I have bad taste. I like these cheap 5-centers better than I liked that one that came out of that little cedar box all wrapped in silver. It had, in fact, it didn't even have an aluminum tube. It had a magnesium tube. I mean, now that's a full-fledged cigar. I mean, that's the kind that Winston Churchill would have considered a worthy adversary, you know. Now, I'm not a cigar type, essentially, but I discovered that I like the cheap ones. It's terrible. You know, it's awful to have to admit that you have a taste for Thunderbird. You know, what's the price? 30 twice, and that's cents. I mean, if they put the year on half the wine that you like on the outside, you know, the year, actually what they ought to put on the wine that most of you guys drink is the date. And I don't mean year, like it says June 4th, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, that kind of stuff. And it's terrible to have to concede that your taste is not really what it should be. It's like the other day, I forced myself. I actually sat down in front of this television set. You know, every week I have a 3-hour period that I assign myself to watch good works on the public broadcasting network. And it's a form of, no. This is a Puritan, it's what's left of our Puritan ethic. It's a form of self-flagellation, and it's also, yes, it is, atoning for your sins. You sit in front of the TV set and, you know, you devour Cannon. You know, I love those car crashes on Cannon. They really, that's a specialty there. The hell with the plot. I suspect one day there's going to be a 90-minute show, or maybe just an hour, maybe, you know, where they do nothing but crash cars and shoot each other, punctuated by an occasional poisoning and with an underplayed counterpoint of implied rape. Boy, what a show. What a show. Of course, Bob Williams would thunder against it, but you notice he watched it. He reviews it every week, you know. And at the same time, he's very much against it. But of course, this is the old tradition of the Puritan in America. You know, you have to taste sin to know what you're talking about from the pulpit. And in fact, I know one minister that got run out of town because he said that he hadn't tasted all of it that was going on in town. He said he didn't want to be indiscriminate in his sermon, so he started to go around town every Saturday night, cleverly disguised, incidentally, as a traveling salesman for used Ford parts. He was traveling around town. I don't want to get into that. It's sickening. So before we go any further, how about let's saluting bad taste? You got to give me a little cheer in there, please. Thank you, thank you. Bad taste is what makes the world go round. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I suppose good taste, though, is anything you say it is. Usually it's whatever you got, huh? Right? Sad, though, today I got I was very excited today. I probably noticed that there's a little note of hysteria in my show tonight. You probably noticed that. Well, that was because today I received a letter that says, Dear Sir, it says, you have been fortunate to have been selected from a list of worldwide people to receive this letter, which originated by a Dutch captain in the East Indies. Now, if you break the chain, bad luck will pursue you forever. The following people broke the chain, and look what happened to them. General Gumpox of Samoa broke the chain, and 5 minutes afterwards his wife got struck by lightning. He was caught cheating at cards, and now he is a remittance man in Bali. It says, so do not break the chain. Good luck. Saint Teresa will pursue you forever, and take the case of Mr. L of Rio de Janeiro, who did not break the chain, and within 3 weeks had inherited over $150,000, which of course was translated into pesos in his country with a 7% discount due to the fact that they have an inheritance tax. However, it was a good deal, and he continued that chain going on. So I got all excited. I get those letters every couple of weeks. I'm on some list, cockamamie list there. It's always originated by the same captain in Holland. Have you ever gotten one of those? Well, you only get those if you have an American Express card. Do you have an American Express? Apparently, you have a Bank America card. You have a library card. Then you're dead. They got your name, right? They got your name. Would you please, if you will, please, the next one. The next one. That's right. This is the sound, ladies and gentlemen, that was cut out of a Marlin Perkins show. It's the sound of a charging bull elephant. Completely annihilated an entire camera crew. Chased Marlin Perkins all the way to Suez. And they cut the whole sequence out, and I thought you'd like to hear it. A fantastic sequence. Would you please reset in there, please? That's right. It's also the sound of our sales manager. Hey, he's in rut, isn't he? There he goes. Look at him. There he goes. That's right. I say feed him oats. Let him eat hay. I mean, to paraphrase a well-known historical character. That's it. That was good, though. That last note there, in the end, that note of desperation, I kind of like that. All right, is it time to make a station break here? Yeah, fine. All right, this is took the sign down in here. I used to know. That's John Gambling's ad-lib cue card over there. This is John I see. There you go, 710. And he's a hell of an ad-libber. Fantastic. Great phrases roll trippingly off his tongue. And unforgettable allusions to lace-like poetic visions. Gee, it's really great, especially about the weather and the traffic. It's really exciting. Now. But when you're on the subject of lace-like visions, hey, have you been following all this CIA stuff? Oh, well, everybody has. I'll tell you, you're going to hear it here first, right? Why hasn't anyone pointed out that almost all of that stuff that was allegedly, ascribed to the CIA, all this stuff, fancy plots, assassination plots, and all that stuff, at what point did this occur, right? Early 60s, right? Who was the most popular hero of the early 60s worldwide? I'm a fictional hero. That is correct. James Bond. And what was the favorite author of the president who was in power at the time? That is correct. And I would have to say there is a curious nobody ever mentions what presidents, when we're dealing with great historical characters, I don't know why people like Eric Sevareid don't delve occasionally into the things that people do, like presidents and secretaries of defense, and particularly presidents, why they don't delve into let's say their private tastes in things which, in a sense, are their relaxants. For example, let's take, for example, if you discovered, just for argument's sake, if you discovered that in my private time, when I'm not on the air or I'm not performing or writing or whatever it is I'm doing, if I'm relaxing, if you discovered that I went to, let's say, cockfights, and I just went to them every night, and I'd stand there and I'd watch these fantastic bloody scenes going on, wouldn't that say something about me? Yes, it would. It would say a lot more about me than my public statements. Now, I don't know why people who consider themselves great commentary experts, people who are great analyses types, who are always saying, according to the statement that was made in Tehran yesterday, they really take all this stuff literally, and they actually believe it. If you go back to the private things that a guy does, you will discover a lot of things that he may ultimately do in his public life, only in a different form. Ah, you go. That's correctimo. And I have a feeling that period, that early 60s period, was a period of kind of great brash romantic concepts of secret service men, dashing around the world with what did double O stand for? Do you recall, Mr.? You mean you don't know the ramifications of what I'm telling you? I don't think you do. Not really. Not unless you really understand James Bond. Now, I'm going to ask a question of you. What was Mr. Bond's number in the Secret Service, his code number? What was the double O? What did the double O stand for? That's the crucial thing. See? Everybody looks dumbly. Well, then you have forgotten the primary characteristic of Mr. Bond that set Mr. Bond apart from all the other Secret Service agents. In fact, he said that there were only 9 Secret Service agents, according to one of the books of the Sacred Canon of Ian Fleming. Only 9 agents had double O numbers, and that is correct. He had a license to kill. and now I'm just bringing this out as perhaps a coincidence, but I'm also saying it's interesting that this happened to have been coinciding this great character. In fact, all over the world, the more people watched Bond movies and went to Bond movies. And why did Mr. Fleming get suddenly very popular? Okay, I'll ask you. It came out one night in the course of a casual conversation with a reporter or something that the then president, Mr. Kennedy, his favorite writer of all was Ian Fleming. At that point, Fleming was almost unknown. He wrote mysteries, or rather wrote adventure stories. They weren't really mysteries. And, everybody saw these things, and that was it. They were just like 1,000 other guys that were on the stands at that time. But the minute that Kennedy said he dug it, the Kennedy mistake was they set a trend. Everything they did, they set a trend. There was a great trend in for example, dark suits. Did you know that the time Mr. Kennedy was in the suit, the kind of suit that he wore was a very big deal, the hair and a whole bit. So anyway, I'm just curious. I'm asking a question here, whether or not you see any parallel. Now let's there. It could very well be coincidental, and yet at the same time, apparently at that period in time, A lot of the activities that were within the various Secret Service communities around the world, not just ours, it was a lot of the Secret Service areas in the world, communities in the world, in the early 60s, bore a curious resemblance to the James Bond scene. You notice, too, that most of Bond's adventures were in the Caribbean? That is correct. So, it's just, could all be coincidental, and yet at the same time, I'm just throwing it out. That when I read about this stuff, I was immediately hit by the I suppose you can say, coincidental parallels. And I've felt, too, it'd be interesting to know, say, for example, what it is, what Abraham Lincoln will say, for argument's sake. What Abraham Lincoln, when he was away from his law office in Springfield, when he was not out wrestling, or whatever it is he did, cut logs or something, what he did when he sat down just to get his jollies to read a little, just relax. Says a great deal about you. What would you think now if you discovered, say, that a famous, we'll just say for argument's sake, a famous lawmaker, we'll say for argument's sake, or a member of the Supreme Court, we'll say, what would you or not believe that his decisions and his attitudes would be colored if you discovered that he, on his weekends, came to New York and spent all of his entire time on the weekend in 42nd Street massage parlors? I mean, just to relax. Well, no, the suggestion here is that would obviously say something about him, wouldn't it? I think that when a guy picks up something to read and he's going to spend 2 hours or 3 hours reading, he will do so out of far more freedom of choice and often subliminal reasons than he will, say, out of something he has to do out of external drives. For example, if somebody comes to you and says, you have to read this geography textbook, so you do. You have to read this economics textbook, you do. And then finally you say, it's a weekend, to hell with it, I'm going to forget studying and all that, I'm relaxing. And what do you do then? Well, that says much more about you, really, than your daily life, in a sense, in the official things you have to do. And so I'm just throwing it out. It will be picked up by some commentator within the day. Some writer will hear this and he's, hey, Harry, for God's sakes, I heard this great idea. How about an editorial on ABC? Fantastic. But remember, you heard it here first. I mean, if it'll do you any good, it never will do me any good. Speaking of, I don't like to belabor the point, but I'm going to give, maybe it's because I judge a lot of things by my own personal life. I think ultimately that all artists do, and I think you should too, because we're much closer, all of us, I'm talking about human beings, than we like to think we are. There is a strain of common desires, emotions, fears that runs through all of humanity that is what makes humanity different from the squirrels. In other words, you're just as much an expert on life as anybody who writes a book about life, believe me. You can only live one at a time, buddy. And I've often felt that guys who write books about life are trying to reassure them that theirs is going okay. Not that they are. But besides the point, when I was a kid, I began to read, just a fanatical reader, and I also went to movies like every other kid did. But I was a great reader and go over to movies and, do just like everybody else does, no more nor less. I was not hung on movies. I've often felt sorry for kids that are. Kids that are hung on movies or hung on reading, where they read 24 hours a day to the exclusion of any real experience of their own. That's really tragic. But nevertheless, right from the very beginning, for whatever reasons I read funny literature. In other words, I began to read at the age of about 10 P.G. Wodehouse. And it forever influenced me. Now, Wodehouse just recently died, and a great master of the language, and he couldn't write a dull line. In addition, he couldn't write a line that wasn't funny. He was incapable of it. So I really dug this. I also read very strongly at all times. I read every last book by F.L. Frank Baum. Who was Frank Baum? Correct, the Oz stories. So the connection between Baum, of course, was great imagination and fantasy and surrealism, and that coupled with P.G. Wodehouse possibly were the two great influences on all my work and everything else I've ever done since. Now, if you started out at the age of 9 reading Dostoevsky, you will forever be a kvetcher. You know, the tragedy of mankind. And so that's a whole different ballgame. And it doesn't put any value judgment on one or the other. Life is to be lived, right? So nevertheless, I just wonder whether or not the Bond popularity of the early 60s had any parallel with a lot in a lot of the activities of the various covert organizations of the time. For example, one of the most famous of the CIA agents of that period thought of himself as a kind of James Bond and in fact wrote novels about the scene. Who was that? Correct. E. Howard Hunt. So there's much more than just a casual cause and effect relationship there. Well, you know, education is a very slippery thing. The formal education that all of us have is either good or bad or in between or mediocre or indifferent or superb, but that's only formal education. The other education is a whole different ballgame. I mean, a completely different ball of wax. I wonder how many guys' chief true education in life came after a fairly extended period in the armed services. I would say more than you'd guess. Because first of all, you're in the Army or in the Navy or in the Marines. You're in those services at a very malleable period in your life. You have just usually either just gotten out of high school or about to go into college. Right in that period, you're what, 19, 20, 22, something like that. And you're ready for anything, you know. All your pores are open, to you know, to put it bluntly. And your pores are open, your knees are good, and you keep a low profile. And so I just wonder what the difference in life attitude. This would be a great PhD thesis. The difference in life attitude of people who spent any time in the armed forces versus those who didn't. Wouldn't that be an interesting study? It just forever changes you. And like one of the great moments in my life, for example, that changed me forever, I'll never forget it. It's one of those things that is a recurring theme in my life, is the discovery that man is very, very small. Now, you don't discover this much living in a big city because the elements bear very little relationship to your daily life. I mean, it's hardly noticeable, the difference in life between summer and winter in New York. The only difference is a slight change of clothing. That's about it. And the tenor of the griping changes just a little bit. But ultimately, the change in life isn't very great. So we're insulated in the big cities. We really are from God's great bowling balls. It's really true. We are insulated. And the realization that we, under the great cosmos that stretches over us, you know, this enormous thing called nature, we are no bigger than gnats or flies. In fact, the other day, the New York Times had a piece way in the back pages about the fact that there are many scientists today who are becoming convinced that we are entering another ice age. And one scientist says that this could happen with cataclysmic speed, like within 2 years. They're reevaluating the old ice ages, and they find now that they came with dramatic suddenness. And the other day, I'm talking to a friend of mine. I says, do you realize that this could all be academic? All of a sudden, I said, can you imagine what would happen if in 2 years suddenly an ice sheet begins to slowly move down, and the next thing you know, Cleveland is under 200 feet of sheet ice, and glaciers are digging big holes in Tennessee. And the guy says, well, we'd have to do something about it. We'd have to work out something to do, you know, but we'd have to do something about that. There must be something they can do. I says, wait a minute. Wait a minute. There must be something they can do. Well, I suppose what he's thinking in terms of, hell, you know, when it gets cold in my house, I just go over and fiddle with the thermostat, you know? We must have some kind of a giant thermostat. After all, we're putting them things up in the air. Put one of the thermostat on it, you know? Set it perfect, see? Well, there are things bigger than all of us, buddy. I'll tell you. Like the time, I mean, I was about 9 when it first came upon, let's say, my curving arc of the great inverted bowl of my own personal night, that we were small. And it got through big bowling balls. Oh, big. No, I was about 10, roughly, when this happened. And it was a lesson, let's put it this way, a real lesson. I'm squatting in the front bedroom in the house, where at that time I was festering as a child. And I had this room, see, which had been assigned to me as my room. It was my room. It's a great feeling when you first get your room, right? My room. And I had my room, see, and I had the pictures on the walls and all kinds of stuff, and I had model airplanes hanging from the ceiling. And I had this desk, which I had bought at the Salvation Army for $2. Now that desk at any flea circus or flea market would be worth $5 million, you know, something like that. It was an oak, solid oak. It took me, Schwartz, Flick, Brunner, Stanley Roper, Jack Morton, Jack Anderson, and 19 other kids just to carry the drawers into the house. We all went down and got. Did you ever go through a period when you were a kid of having an intense desire to own a desk? This is a basic kid urge. Now, I'm not so sure that this is a female kid urge. I'm not going to quote that, but I can just simply say it is a male kid urge. And we went through the whole big thing of owning a desk, and you had to have a desk. Also, do you remember when you went through the first surge as a kid of owning a wallet? You know, and you had stuff in your wallet, you know. And so we went through this desk thing, which came suddenly with dramatic suddenness one summer. And it was because Flick got a desk. Now, how he got a desk was that his uncle moved out. His uncle lived in the house there with him, see, and he moved out. And as he moved out, he left his desk behind. And Flick was given that room, and now Flick had a desk. And Flick would sit at his desk, and he would write things. You know, just sit down and write things like dog, cat, bird. After all, you know, he's at his desk, and he had stuff in the drawers like strings and BB gun tubes of BBs and you know, all kinds of stuff. It was his desk. Well, immediately that hit us, man. I mean, we had to have a desk. See, so among other places that we went, we found out that you could get old desks down in the basement of the Salvation Army, and that desk was so heavy. It was the kind of desk that they, you know, obviously came out of some small town lawyer's office, something like that. Must have weighed 7, 8, 9 tons. Tremendous desk. A giant thing. And so I had it sitting there. I wonder whatever happened to that desk. I don't know. Have you ever wondered what happened to a lot of stuff you had in your life? You know? You know, it's funny. Things just sort of dribble out of your existence, just like, I can't remember ever throwing away a guitar. And yet I am without a guitar. And I know at one point I had a guitar. I don't know where it went. Maybe life is... see, there's a certain thing called the attrition of things, you know, just to slip out. You know, one day you're going to run into your own life at a flea market. You could be standing there, you know, and there is the picture of you in your graduation gown, and it'll be selling for $2. So what the devil is? As a matter of fact, you're looking at a guy who has a picture, and if you want to make a bid on it, it's priceless, because obviously there's not many people can say they got one. I have a picture, which I bought at a flea market. Now, don't ask me why I did it. It was an uncontrollable urge. I have a picture, a complete big picture. It came in a 19th, like a late 19th, early 20th century frame with glass. It's all beautiful. Of the class of 1920 of CCNY. The entire class. I have a picture that has the entire 1920 class of CCNY. Now, I don't know anybody that went to CCNY, certainly in 1920. That's just after Richard the Lionheart had cashed in. I mean, that was, you know, the class of 1920 was F. Scott Fitzgeraldsville and all that, you know. And here it is all these, they're kind of oval pictures. All these, you know, the oval pictures, these guys with white, stiff-looking collars and black ties, and they're all looking very, very sober. There isn't a smile on the entire lot. And they got giant heads of hair, and their collars go real big, high up. And they got these dark, scratchy-looking suits. And you can see that the picture goes down to each guy, down about his third vest button. And all of them have got chains hanging on their vests, you know, and stuff like that. And underneath it, it says, the class of 1920. In 1920 type script, hand done. And underneath it, it says, City College of New York. I couldn't resist that. You know, so I have it. So anybody need the class of 1920 of City College of New York? Been looking for years for it, right? Just let me know. This is probably the only one extant that is not owned by a class of 1920. And it was a small crowd. There were only about, gee, I'd say there's about 40 or 50 guys in the picture. Amazing. All right, but I'm sitting at you want to hear what happened to me? All right. I'm sitting at my desk, see. Now, I had just gotten my amateur license. Now, any kid that is involved in electronics at about the age of 10 is obviously a kid that is involved in something very close to necromancy. It's like the study of the eternal tablets of the dead, because the rest of the crowd, the neighborhood, everybody else is completely inexplicable to them. You know, normal kids did stuff like bounce rubber balls, or walked around and hollered, "Hey, how are you, Scott?" You know, that's what normal kids did. But me and Stanley Roper, night after night, we were reading Nilsson and Hornung, the Q&A. Now, I know grown men who are scared when they hear that, the Q&A. Yeah, that's right. You wouldn't believe it, how precocious. I mean, would you believe that at the age of 14, I had a second-class commercial? And would you believe by the age of 18, I had a first phone? So, you know, we're really something else, see? And here I am, sitting at my desk, and I figure I got the world by the you-know-what. And on top of the house, I had put a 20-foot tower right up on top of our two-story frame house, and I ran a 66-foot, 40-meter flat-top ZEP right back to the garage. And it was fed with open wire feed, 600 ohm, you know, the open wire feed. And I'm sitting there, see, I'm on top of it, man, and it was a beautiful summer day. And about every 20 minutes, whenever I would be in there doing what I did, my mother says, "Why don't you go play with your radio?" Play with your radio. I'm sitting in there talking to Murmansk, playing with my radio. And it was a mysterious thing that was going on. Nobody knew what I was doing in there. They'd come in and they'd look. My mother always had a great fear. She used to come in and say things like, "You'll get a shock. Now be careful. You'll get a shock." My mother, as a matter of fact, one time did not mow the lawn for over 2 weeks because there was a 6-inch piece of copper wire that was laying in our yard, just laying there. She figured you could get a shock from any wire. Just the wire could give you a shock, see? Like a snake. It was like a hooded cobra. And she used to say, "You're going to get a shock." And I'd say, "Nah, come on, Ma, I know what I'm doing." And I'm in there working away, and it was a quiet June afternoon. And out in the Midwest, friends, thunderstorms come up like, they come up like balls of puff out of China across the way. Boom, just like that. All of a sudden, a thunderstorm hit, and I'm sitting there talking to a guy in Denver. And my mother keeps saying, "Now, be careful, you're going to get a shock." And she's out in the kitchen. And I'm working this guy in Denver when suddenly, without any warning, crack! Boom! 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 My antenna was struck by a bolt of lightning. It came right down the 600-ohm feed, blew my rig into ionization. It was just a purple cloud. Knocked me under the daybed. Pushed the side of the house out. My mother came running in from the kitchen and said, I told you you'd get a shock. And at that point, my life changed, and it has never gone back. There are big things out there that man will never understand.
By recording from New York, you've been listening to Inside Gene Shepard. Our next Shepard program will be at 6:30 Thursday evening.